Samsung's Galaxy S6 is an absolutely beautiful smartphone, but it's also absolutely impractical for a sporty lifestyle. Enter the Galaxy S6 Active, a heavyweight version of the 2015 flagship built to take tougher treatment. We covered the differences between them in a previous comparison, and now, after 7 days, it's time to render our final verdict. I'm Michael Fisher with Pocketnow, and this is our video review of the Galaxy S6 Active. The Active's hardware looks a lot like the standard Galaxy S6 wrapped in a super durable casing, and the reality isn't far from that. In years past, tough smartphones equaled underwhelming smartphones on the spec sheet, but with each successive generation of its Active line, Samsung has brought its durable smartphones closer to parity with its standard offerings. Here, that means you'll find the same Quad HD display on the S6 Active as on the regular S6, powered by the same Exynos processor, backed up by the same 3 gigs of RAM. As you may recall, we found the battery on the stock S6 pretty underwhelming, so we were pleased to see Samsung boost its size by 37% in the Active for longer endurance. And here, the fact that the phone's power pack is non-removable actually works in its favor. Previous generations of Active suffered from water intrusion due to their battery doors not always sealing properly, so omitting that vulnerability entirely makes the phone even more solid. Backing that up is an alphabet soup of certifications. The phone is rated to IP68 and MIL standard 810G. The former rating means the phone is fully dustproof and capable of surviving immersion in fresh water, in this case up to 1.5 meters of it for up to 30 minutes. The MIL standard certification adds resistance to humidity, temperature extremes, and impact damage. Samsung says you can drop it from up to 4 feet on a hard surface, and these claims have all pretty much held up. It worked fine after a half hour in the freezer, and, aside from a single reboot, it didn't seem to mind a long stretch in direct sunlight either. Also, after repeated tosses and tumbles against asphalt and concrete, the phone's polycarbonate casing is pitted and scarred, but there's no lasting damage to speak of, and no shattered screen either, thanks to the slight recess built into the casing. Ditto the water testing. We'll be taking it to greater depths in a future feature, but over the past week the Active's been splashed, sprayed, submerged, and even left in a full bathtub for over 30 minutes with no ill effects. It's not without the occasional weirdo moments. For a while, after taking it out of the water, it sometimes thinks a dock is connected, which you can fix by blowing on the USB port like it's an old Nintendo cartridge and then waiting a while for it to dry out. There are no such shortcuts for the speakerphone, which takes forever to dry after a swim, during which time it's so quiet and rattly it's almost useless. But sauce for the goose, as they say. Most durable smartphones run into issues like this, and on the whole, this hardware lives up to the promise of a smartphone you don't have to worry about too much. The software on the S6 Active is exactly what you'd expect if you've seen our review of the standard Galaxy S6, and that goes for highs and lows alike. On the high side, this is a slimmed-down version of Samsung's TouchWiz user interface that's much snappier and slightly sleeker than what's come before, and you can customize it for free with a growing number of available themes on Samsung's App Store, which we really like. On the low side, it's still TouchWiz, so some things that work very well in stock Android stumble a bit here. Also, the Active is still stuck on a version of Android that brings out the worst in Lollipop's memory management problems. Multitasking is inconsistent, app crashes are almost routine, and there's a bug that causes some apps, like the game Ingress, to crash when launching them from the new Active key, but not when launching them from the app drawer, which is bizarre. That odd behavior aside, the Active key is a really nice addition to this phone. The activity zone it links to is the typical, predictable outdoorsy hub containing a lot of useful items that have been somewhat uselessly grouped together. The real convenience of the additional button is the fact that you can set it to start any 2 apps of your choosing via a short press or a long press, and either one will bypass the lock screen for a very quick launch. Fortunately, you don't need to use up one of those shortcuts for the camera, because while Samsung has omitted the fingerprint scanner from the Active's home key, you can still double-click it to jump right into the viewfinder. By all accounts, the 16-megapixel camera here is the same exact module in the stock S6, and the results bear that out. That is to say, it's still one of the best cameras on Android, and on smartphones as a whole. That means crisp, colorful photos in daylight with excellent sharpness and saturation. It means an HDR mode that does its job in bringing out the highlights in darker areas without going so far as to create halos around everything. It means brighter nighttime pictures that aren't without noise, but are much better than most competition, thanks to optical stabilization and an f1.9 aperture. It means selfies that, despite some distortion at the edges, more often than not come out the way you want them to, regardless of light level. And it means a host of manual controls that can make a photo like this into a photo like this, with just a few button presses. Can it take an ugly picture? Sure. Is it likely to? Nope. This camera is awesome. Oh, and it can take pictures underwater, too. Carrying the Galaxy S6 Active for a week has reinforced some of the similarity to its less active sibling, but it's also thrown the differences into stark relief. Battery life is the biggest of these. With 3,500 mAh of LiPo power, the S6 Active routinely delivers solid uptime. Even with heavy use, we've twice been able to get 5.5 hours of screen-on time between charges. That makes it an endurance match for the Nexus 6 and Droid Turbo, and just like those devices, it also offers both wireless and wired charging options. Using the included adaptive fast charger, replenishment time is a little better than 1% per minute. It'll go from 0 to 100% charge in about an hour and 45 minutes, with the power off. The negatives are familiar ones for the most part. For one thing, the battery life would probably be even better without cell standby eating so much of it, a problem we also saw on T-Mobile's version of the S6. The storage options are, well, non-existent. You're limited to a 32 gig version with no microSD expansion, and much of that is eaten up by the system image out of the box. Also, like its active predecessors, this phone has a tendency to turn its screen on for no reason in a pocket. And while the speakerphone is loud when it's dry, placing it on the back of the phone makes no sense to us. Ending on a solid note, the S6 Active gave us our first chance to try out at&t's HD Voice. It only works when the other caller is on a compatible phone in a supported market, but holy megahertz, what a difference! Calls over HD Voice are as clear as the best Skype or FaceTime audio calls, with more fidelity than you'll find on any standard cellular connection. We're looking forward to this becoming the norm for voice calls in the future. For now, the Galaxy S6 Active is exclusive to at&t in the US, and if past experience is any indication, it's likely to stay that way. So you have to be cool with Big Orange, or willing to unlock it for Little Magenta, to consider this device. But what you'll get is a more durable and more capable smartphone than any Samsung that's come before. It lasts much longer on a charge than the regular S6, and it's effectively the same price to boot. If you're in need of an Android phone that takes a beating without surrendering top-tier features, the S6 Active should be at or near the top of your list of contenders, even if that means you've got to think about switching carriers. For more on the Galaxy S6 Active, check out our comparison with the stock S6, our 24-hour drop test video, and our full text review available at Pocketnow on June 23rd. Till next time, this has been Michael Fisher, Captain Two Phones on Twitter, reminding you to keep your Galaxy active and your USB dry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.